Hello, everyone. Hello. Sorry, I was having a bit of technical difficulties there. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of My Take. Today is season three. Uh, we're in season three, episode three. We're really glad that you tuned in to join our conversation. My name is Faye, and I'm here with my girlfriends, Tosi, Lola, and Tutu. Ladies, say hello. Great. So
Hello.
my good. My take is a forum where we ladies we hang out, we unwind and chat about the things that are happening around us while lending our voices to the social issues that are going on in the world today. Our goal is to promote a culture of love and compassion as well as truth and openness. On today's episode, in honor of Mother's Day, which is tomorrow, we want to address a topic that is near and dear to the heart of many. We're going to be talking about wanting a baby. Help, I want a baby is the topic of conversation for today. So, what we want to discuss today is what do we do when things don't go as planned? Many get married and then they try to have kids, but year after year, they can't get pregnant. Or just as heartbreaking, they do get pregnant, but the pregnancy doesn't stay. What do we do when childbirth doesn't happen as expected? Or you even you have others who want kids and are getting older, but they're not yet married. What are their options? What should they do? And because we come from a church background, we like to explore how has the church supported or not supported exploration of alternatives to childbirth. This is what we're here to talk about today. And we would love to hear from you. So please share your comments on the chat. So looking forward to hearing from you all. But today, to start us off, we have a guest who has experienced the struggles with childbirth and is here to share her story. Motoye, please come in and introduce yourself.
Hi, Faye. Thank you very much, ladies, for having me with y'all this morning. I feel really blessed to be here and get the opportunity to share my story and just contribute to people's understanding of all of this. But yeah, so my name is Omotoye. I'm based in Houston, Texas, with my husband and two children. One is 3, and the one I'm holding right now, Eliana, she is 6 weeks old. I've been married for, I've got to get this right, 11 and a half years. 11 and a half years we've been married. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Motoye, and even thank you much more for agreeing to share your story. So let's start off by hearing a bit more from you and how you have come from the time when you got married to where you are now in terms of childbirth.
Sure.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so my husband and I, we got married in 2010. And going into marriage, I kind of expected that childbirth for me might be a little complicated or it might take a little while because I have something called PCOS. So polycystic ovarian syndrome. So going in, I knew that there was a possibility that, this wasn't going to be a 6-month thing, a 1-year thing. So, about 9 months to a year into marriage, we started trying. And we tried after the first year, nothing, absolutely nothing, not even like a whiff of a pregnancy, nothing at all. And then we just started this multi-year process of trying different interventions to help us get pregnant. So everything from acupuncture to Clomid. Some people might be familiar with that. It helps you to ovulate. We tried herbs, all the kind of like natural interventions. And then let me see. So I think it was 2015, we decided that we would go into IVF. And so with IVF, frankly, we were expecting that process, difficult as it is, if you go through it, you got to inject yourself every day, you got to go through all these things, you got to retrieve your eggs and all whatnot. But at the same time, we kind of were hopeful that, well, listen, with IVF now, you've got a very controlled process. Surely this is going to work and it's going to be easy. Well, ladies, I went through 4 rounds of IVF with nothing. Right, so my first 2 rounds of IVF just didn't work at all. Each time I put 2 embryos in, and it failed. I didn't get pregnant. The doctor really didn't have any explanation as to why that wasn't happening, because all other factors seemed positive. My third round of IVF, it did result in a pregnancy. I lost that pregnancy at 6 weeks. And then my fourth round of IVF resulted in pregnancy yet again. And this one, actually seemed like it was working. But unfortunately, I lost that pregnancy at 18 weeks. So I actually had to deliver her. And so that was really painful. That was in 2017. And so this is after what, almost 7 or 8 years of just trying different things, to essentially no avail, no result. And by the end of that 2017, I was done. I was like, my body's just been through so much, the emotional roller coaster that you're going through every single time. And so I just said to my husband, maybe this is just not for us. Like, and so I just started to switch my prayers to, it wasn't so much about faith that God couldn't do it, but it was more like, okay, Lord, can we find contentment in where you have us now? Right? If this is not on the cards for us, how do we find contentment in you, in each other, with if there's no more? And then at that point, we actually started thinking about adoption. We had always thought about adoption as a way we wanted to grow our family. We knew we wanted 2 children, and we had talked about maybe having one and adopting one. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe we just go straight to adoption and not forget about all, the having a child biologically. So we started working on applications and research about agencies. We even looked into an agency that does adoptions even from Nigeria, which is beautiful. Um, so we started doing that. We submitted our paperwork, and then found out that I was pregnant. So that was my son. It really truly was a miracle. I cannot tell you to today how that happened, because everything, yeah, I don't know how it happened. It was just a God thing. So found out I was pregnant. So we put a pause on the adoption process. Um, and was able to carry that pregnancy right through to the end. I did have to have a couple of surgeries, because I learned that I found I had something called an incompetent cervix. So, that just meant that my cervix couldn't hold the baby. So I had to have a couple of surgeries in the course of the pregnancy in order to stitch my cervix and make sure that the baby would stay inside. But outside of that, it was a really good, healthy pregnancy. Of course, I was dealing with a lot of fear in that, right? Like, I didn't even tell anybody I was pregnant until I was past 20 weeks, because I'd lost the baby at 18 weeks. That's not supposed to happen. So it was a kind of a very fine line between just joy, fear, hope, right? Expectation. But yeah, to God be the glory. We gave birth to my son, Anjarelua, in March 28th, 2019. He just turned 3 this year. So that was he's our miracle baby. And then once Andrea was about 1 or so, we started revisiting the adoption. We still wanted 2 kids. And so we were like, I said to my husband, there's no way I'm putting my body through all of that, right? Because it wasn't just a 9-month pregnancy for me, it was 9 years of putting my body through all these things, talk less of emotions and whatnot. And so we said, yep, adoption is how we want to go. And so we started that route. Initially, we started on the foster to adopt route. And then later on, we decided, look, that process is not going to be right for us. And so we ended up in the private adoption. Um, After about 9 months of waiting, we got a call about her on the 8th of March to talk to a birth mom. And 2 weeks later, we had a baby. so so that's there's a lot in between there, but that's the short story. And she was born on the 24th of March, and we got to call her ours on the 28th of March, which, if you remember, is Andre's birthday too. So it was a nice kind of birthday present for Big Brother. And her name is Eliana, which means God answered.
Wow. Wow. All I could think about, wow. Wow. I don't know if you all can hear me. I think I'm having a bit of technical challenges. But all I could think about while you were talking was, see how God turned your morning into dancing. It's amazing. It's an amazing story. It's a beautiful story. And it also reminds me of something my mom said when I was younger, and it always resonated with me. And my mom said we had a neighbor who had a child and couldn't have a second child for the longest time, and then she adopted, and then almost immediately after she adopted, she ended up getting pregnant, and my mom said, "Omolongbo mowa." So as you know, as you were planning to adopt, then you had your own. I believe that there's a special grace, there's a special anointing that comes with adoption. That's just my personal take, and I've seen it in people that I know's lives. So anyway, I think it would be good to hear from the ladies on their thoughts on the various alternatives to childbirth, and what are the pros and cons, to all the different alternatives that are out there. Tosi, maybe we can start with you.
Motoye, that was a wonderful, wonderful testimony. I was blown away when you shared it at first, and again, listening to it and how God just showed Himself strong. We cannot take it for granted what God has done for you guys and other couples that have stepped out in serious faith to say, God, there are many ways in which you can come to bless us in having a baby. There's not just one way. Sometimes, we turn our relationship with God, we turn it into a religious act, and we get stuck in, oh, if you go to this other means, you're not having faith in God. You know, we feel as if we're not being patient enough, or we're not being, what is it, tolerant enough, or, patient and all those things. But God has many ways. I mean, we could take different parts of the Bible where, God was very much interested in surrogacy, where God was very much interested in, the process of adoption, in which we are all I was talking to you, and you said, wait, we are all adopted children of God. God adopted us into His family. So how do we think that God is not interested in adoption? There are various ways. Of course, I'm not knowledgeable about everything, and I'm sure, Motoye, with your journey, you've been privy to a lot of ways, but parts which you share with us later. One of the ones you shared was the private adoption versus the foster to adopt, adoptions methods. So I don't know if you want to shed more light on those.
Yeah, so there are multiple alternatives with respect to adoption. Um, there's private adoption, which means you go through an agency. The agency, you'll go through the process. You'll even be able to tell the agency what your preferences are. So what are you open to? So, like, for example, for us, because we already had a child and we wanted to preserve birth order, one of our preferences was whatever child we have needs to be under 2. right? So that we preserve, Andrea is first, then his sibling will be the second, etc. So that was something for us. It doesn't have there's nothing magical about that. Some people care about that, some people don't. But you get to share what your preferences are. Do you want a boy? Do you want a girl? Do you want twins? Do you, are you know um so what then happens is the agency goes through what they call matching. So they would go to find there's all these women for whatever reason who cannot or don't believe that they can um, carry on with actually raising the child, but they have instead of terminating the pregnancy via abortion, they've chosen to carry the child to term. um, and so you would get matched in that process. You would get to know who your birth mom is. If there's a birth father, you'd get to know that person too, and get to know a little bit of their history. You'd get matched. And it goes from there. And in most of those scenarios, it's not 100%, but in most of those scenarios, you would get that child from birth, from infancy, just like we did with Eliana. um, um, in the foster to adopt, that's more so in most cases you're adopting from the state, or an agency that's working in collaboration with the state. And so in most cases, these are children that from whatever age, they vary in age. Some are infants, some are a little older, some are even 7, 8, 10 years old, teens even, that have been removed from their um, family situation because of some kind of, the state has deemed that that situation is not safe. Maybe it could be drugs, it could be abuse, it could be whatever else, abandonment. And so in that situation, you're essentially adopting from the state. As far as pros and cons, I think from the private adoption perspective, you do have a little bit more control on the process, at least as far as kind of your choices go. The cons in for that is it is quite expensive, the cost of that, depending on what agency you use. Um, and also there's some risk in it as well. There's none of this stuff that is without risk, right? I mean, when we were going with her to get her, we had 72 hours where before the mom can sign termination of her parental rights. And I have to tell you, that was the longest 72 hours I ever had. And I remember saying to my husband, I did not realize that coming even into this process, I could miscarry, because that's what it was going to feel like if she changed her mind. Um, so the cost is the biggest con, I think, to the private adoption. And the fact that you have to wait till the very end. You have to wait till the end. The mother and the father have to terminate their rights. As far as the foster to adopt, one of the pros to that is usually it happens pretty quickly, right? Because there are already so many children waiting for a home. So that happens fairly quickly. Most people, once they've gotten their license, they get the call sometimes that same day or within a couple of weeks. Hey, we have this situation, this child, can we bring them? Um, it can happen pretty quickly. Also, the state provides support. So they actually essentially pay you like a stipend to help take care of the child. So you do get that additional financial support and assistance from the state, which can be very helpful. I think the con in that situation is you have to be truly open to anything. A lot of the children that are coming in that situation are coming from trauma, right? I mean, I think in any adoption situation you do have a little bit of residual trauma, but in that case they are coming from tough situations. So I think you do have to be willing to love a child through that, depending on their age. I think that's the biggest con too. I think the foster to adopt, while you get the child immediately, the process to actually finalizing the adoption can take a little bit longer, and the state has requirements of you in that time. And so that can be a little bit it's nothing difficult. It can be a while, right? Sometimes it takes 6 months to close, sometimes it could be up to a couple of years to close. Oh, and then I guess aside from adoption, you also have surrogacy. right? I don't know too much about surrogacy because that wasn't something that we had considered. But surrogacy is essentially where you have somebody, it's your egg, it's your egg, it's your husband's sperm. Um, so it's your embryo, but you have another woman carry the child for you. I don't know too much about that, but I do know that again, that one can be a little bit costly because you have responsibilities to the surrogate while she's pregnant. But at the same time, I think if 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 you have healthy embryos, but maybe I spoke to a lady yesterday who she actually fell into a coma in her first childbirth. So that's somebody for whom childbirth is just not, it's just too dangerous for her, right? So surrogacy might be a good alternative for someone like that. And in for surrogacy, it doesn't always have to be a random third party. Like if you have a sister or family member or friend or someone who you know and you trust who's willing to do that for you, that's an option in surrogacy as well. I won't say too much about that because I don't want to misspeak, but I know that's definitely an option too.
Part of what you said that really stayed with me is that you can miscarry even with the adoption process. That really that stayed with me. As somebody who has actually miscarried as well. It's so there are definitely these risks that need to be considered. However, in our community especially, there's a general aversion, I would say, to exploring these alternatives to childbirth, and that's why we have you on the show to kind of shine a light and say, I know people, dear friends and family who have just not ended up having kids just because they weren't open to exploring these alternatives. And to me it's heartbreaking because, as you said, there's so many children in this world who don't have parents, and there's so many parents that could potentially love these kids. So anyway, I wanted us to talk a bit more about this. Like, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Why do our people shun alternatives to childbirth? Lola, why don't you start us off with that conversation?
Well, it's interesting because this is one area where I personally know different people, friends and family that have that have gone the different routes to becoming parents. I know, those that have done it through IVF and done childbirth. I know those that have done it through surrogacy. And I know folks who have adopted. And so the people immediately around me, excuse me, I find to be kind of open to that, but their journey had not been easy in terms of the stigma around that, in terms of people's opinions and thoughts around whether or not they should have gone that route. Um, and I think that is the primary reason why a lot of folks that may have wanted to consider alternative do not, because especially in the Christian community, it's almost like, and people will use scripture to say why, but it's almost like you've given up on God. You're not trusting God. That's the premier way, the primary way, almost the only way to legitimately have a child is through birth. And even people will tell you, even with that, it only must be natural birth, depending on who you talk to, like with no epidural, no C-section or whatever. But people feel like that is the only legitimate way, and so any other thing outside of that is, you know not natural, is not the way to go. And I personally don't believe that. I've seen women, excellent mothers, and they didn't get their children, the traditional way. And both parties, the mother and child, have been abundantly blessed from it. So personally, I wish that more people would be open to it. I, have always been passionate about adoption. When I was in my early 20s and I was single, I was at a church where they came and did a presentation on adoption. And I signed up to adopt because they had said, oh, you can be single, and adopt. You don't have to be married to adopt. There were so many kids in the foster care system there in Delaware at the time, and I was like, I'll do it. Sign me up. And that particular route that they were talking about that day was foster to adoption. And so I signed up to be a foster parent with the intention of adopting. I still very much have a passion for that. I want to do that. Um, when I got married, I ended up, having children right away, and that desire to adopt hasn't gone away for me. However, I'm the type of person that whoever I adopt is, I mean, it's is as much have come out of my body as the children that come of my body. So if I adopt a kid, I must be able to take care of them like I do my other children. I put my kids in private school. All my kids will have, I have to be able to afford to care for them equally. So me not adopting at the moment is a matter of the number of kids I have and whether or not I can take care of all those kids. But I still see it in my future, and I'm a great advocate for that. Um, but I'm always like, however way you can parent, I try to encourage my siblings, go be big brother, big sister. There are kids that just are in homes, but are not in safe homes that need mentoring, that you can be a pseudo parent to. There's so many options. And I encourage people to be open to that.
Thanks, Lola. I mean, I think you touched on an important point. This whole idea that not having kids the traditional way is a lack of faith. I've seen that so pervasively in the church. Um, Even to the point of what you were saying about, oh, even C-section, oh, it has to be like Hebrew women. I mean, I think we need to dig deep on this particular topic because I think it has hindered a lot of people from actually, trying out adoption or surrogacy, as the case may be. Tutu, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Motoye, for your story. Very, very touching. And thank God for your children. And Eliana looks so beautiful. Thank you. And thank you, ladies, for at least sharing. Personally, I mean, before I got married, I was actually interested in being a surrogate mom for two of my friends in particular. In fact, when I met my husband, I told him about it. Like, I have two friends that as soon as they are ready, I'll be willing to be a surrogate mom for them. And he was shocked, because I hadn't even had my own kids then. But thankfully, one of them, you know, has her own child right now. The other doesn't, unfortunately. But I must, the caveat is as soon as I had kids, I mean, that idea died right away. I finally realized, I'm not um other than, my children, my three children that I have right now, I don't have the grace to mother more children other than, having kids temporarily and spoiling them. But I do advocate for adoption, especially among Christians. And this is an area that I'm also very passionate about. I'm very concerned about the way people interpret scriptures at times, like Lola said about, by faith, you must have your own child standing on God's word. And I would like to point out that God Himself has been an example to us. If we look deeply into the Bible, I mean, look at Mary. Mary, the mother of Jesus. Mary was essentially a surrogate mom. Okay, I know for religious people, I just said something sacrilegious, but really, Mary was a surrogate. I mean, she got pregnant through the power of the Holy Spirit. Joseph was Jesus's adopted father. Joseph was not his biological father. So God has already given us an example. He set the example himself. So there is not, I mean, you can't be more righteous than, God himself. So I think the church needs to shed more light. Being a joyful parent doesn't mean that, the child has to come out of your body. I mean, Motoye is an example. Lola has examples of people that have gone through this. I mean, I think the church, let's start with the church. The church should encourage adoption, encourage surrogacy. I mean, and it doesn't mean you do not have faith. Like Faye has given examples of, people she knows that immediately they adopted, God opened the door for them to have their own kids. And some people fear that they may not be able to love the adopted child once they have their own kids. Then I think that, I mean, that just speaks to who they are themselves, but I just think that, we should encourage people. And another thing again is for for the body of Christ in particular, like the way people talk about the stigma. I mean, as Christians, this shouldn't even be mentioned amongst us. Like, why should you look at somebody else? Like, we put pressure on people unnecessarily. So just because someone decides to adopt and they tell you, so you now think they are not working in faith. So I think we Christians also need to check ourselves. We are really the problem. So we add more burden on the people. Let's support people. Let's meet people at their level of faith. It's just like when some people are sick, they don't want to go to the hospital. I mean, thank God people are coming out of that bondage gradually and realizing that God is the one that has given doctors, the medical professionals, the wisdom to invent and come up with all these other things, benefits that we are enjoying today. So as the body of Christ, let's encourage people around us, that want to adopt. Be the positive voice, and then for leadership, church leadership, at our meetings, when we pray for people trusting God for children, let's also promote this idea that they can consider surrogacy, they can consider adoption. Thank you.
Can I jump in and add a couple of things there?
Yes,
And,
please.
I think, you mentioned biblical examples. I think Moses is a really important one. Moses was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, and that was actually God's plan, right? God ordained that. And had Moses not been adopted into Pharaoh's family, he would not have been equipped with the tools and access to deliver the children of Israel later on. So, I mean, that's one example where that adoption was actually God ordained, God's purpose, God's plan. And so, who knows whether the child you adopt could be a Moses? Who knows? And the other thing I wanted to add, which I think we're all Nigerians here or of Nigerian origin here, culture, right? Our culture sometimes can be a bit of a barrier and a hurdle. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I think when we were thinking about adoption, um, I did think about, I mean, I knew how my immediate family was going to respond and react, but what about my extended family? Because as you know, in our culture, family is not just me, my husband, and my two kids. Family is my extended family, my cousins, my aunties, my uncles. How are they all going to receive and respond and behave and act towards this adopted child? The good thing, for us was, um, in our family, we already had, both on both sides of the family, my parents, my grandparents had other people that they took into their home. Now, back home, we don't call that adoption, right? You just always have this one extra person living in your house that your family takes care of and things like that. But that's kind of what it is. That is adoption. Is just that over here there's a legal and kind of framework around that. So I think, one, thankfully I had that example from my family, and then the second is kind of being brave to educate them too, like sitting with my parents and answering their questions. While they were supportive, I definitely had to demystify some things, like, because people have all these questions and concerns. Oh, can the birth mom come back and take the child? No, she cannot. Just kind of demystifying some of those concerns, and really just making it clear that this adopted child is our child. And I thank God that, from my family, they've received Eliana with open arms, because everything happened so fast for her. Frankly, some members of our family only had 3 days to get accustomed to the idea that we have this new member of a family. She's ours, she's yours, and that's that. So I think culture is a big part of it. I think our culture is changing. I think we need to lean into into this and lean into education, lean into demystifying. I think one other thing as women too is maybe sometimes we feel like um, adopting or not birthing a child makes you less of a woman somehow, that you're not kind of fulfilling your feminine duty. I don't know how to put that. And I think, you know, again, just encouraging, like you said, Tutu, is um Moses mom wasn't any less of a mother to him than the mother that birthed him, right? I think um and the human heart, God has blessed us with this huge capacity to love. I can tell you, I love Eliana no different than how I love Angelua. Like I didn't have 9 months to prepare for that. I had 2 weeks. You know, but that's love, and God does that. God does do that. So I think those are some of the other reasons why people might be worried about it. But those are all surmountable things. We just kind of need to get ourselves educated. We need to talk about it more, which I'm so grateful for this conversation, and just seek understanding.
Thank you. I wanted to add before am I muted? Okay. I hope you guys can hear me.
Mhm.
Um it's something that struck me. You know, when we have our kids, you know, there's this general natural ability to love what comes out of our body. Of course, there are exceptions to the rules, but there's this natural thing to love what comes out of our body. I think for me, it takes a higher grace for someone to adopt and love that person equally as the child came out of their body. So trust me, it is like I was sharing with you, Motoya. I was saying that my goal for this is that people understand that God has called some of us to a higher purpose when it comes to adoption and surrogacy and finding alternative means to childbirth. Childbirth is not just another way. What would God have you do? Now, just because you had your son and you could have stopped at that point, but you didn't. You could have said, you know what, I got my kid, I'll just keep trying the natural way, but you didn't. You felt that God called you to a higher purpose for you to move to this child. And I just hope that people would, you know, decide that God may be calling them to a higher purpose. I've seen marriages break up. I've seen, you know, one of my friends being left because the guy could not, you know, stay. You know, that there wasn't the need for that if only this was a viable option that they could see. But like you said, our culture sometimes frowns upon it. And I'm just, I love my culture, but I get frustrated with my culture because I feel we are really tying the hands of God when He wants to move in different regards. I feel we are really limiting what God wants to do. We, you know, the culture. God needs to open our eyes.
I mean,
And
it's interesting.
can I just
Yeah.
add just in response to that about loving, um, and I say this usually we're talking in the context of relationships. To love is a choice. It's a choice, and and I think you can choose to love someone, and sometimes, um, just like it would in a relationship, I think it starts even with a commitment, right? So I'm, you know, again, me loving Eliana, it didn't happen instantaneously, right? What happened first was, and because again, you know, again, I didn't share all the ins and outs of it, but there was this period where it looked like 50-50 we may get her or not. And so I had to even protect my heart in that moment, keeping a little bit of distance, right? Just to guard and protect my own emotions. Um, but my commitment to her first was I want what's best for her. That was my first commitment. I want what's best for her. And then I am going to take care of her. I am going to love her. That's a choice. And then you start off in that choice, and then somehow God does it. And here we are. Like, you know, my son loves her. I mean, to see him just dote on her is is so sweet. My husband loves her. When you see her as a little baby just cling on to my husband's chest like she was already born there, you know. So I think it starts with it's number one, it's a choice. And sometimes you first have to start walking that commitment, and then all the feelings and emotions all come before you even know it.
So it's like you guys were preempting, because this is the next thing I wanted us to discuss. Is it really true that you encounter more problems when raising a child that is not from traditional childbirth? I mean, we talked about, oh, it's easier to love someone who comes from your body, but there are many moms who have postpartum depression and cannot connect with their babies. So I don't know. I don't know that it is necessarily easier. People talk about, oh, you may have problems, raising the children. We have problems raising traditional children. So personally, I think it's exactly what you said. It's a choice and it's a mindset. And if you carry a positive mindset and the same mindset that you would for whether the child was from you or not, I think it guarantees more of a success, as opposed to tying every problem you may have or every issue you may have to the fact that the child didn't come from you. So I mean, I wanted to hear a bit more on this. Lola, let's hear from you on this.
Yeah, I was going to say that it is very important for people to be able to, before they choose this route, to know their limits, to accept their limits, know what they can and cannot do. I think while we want folks to adopt children, it's a choice. And if you know that you cannot see that child the same way that you would see your biological child, then maybe that route is not for you, because there's an education piece component involved, right? You have to be able to accept that in order for you to be able to educate the people around you to say, this is my child, and we're loving this child and we're not treating her or him any differently. So I think, first of all, starting with your reasons for adopting is critical. You know that why you're adopting, and it's just about you, is just as much about the child as it is about you, and loving and giving life to another human being, just as it is for your own biological child. So I think that's important, a good starting place, because without that, it's going to be a difficult journey for everyone involved. And I think sometimes people adopt for the wrong reasons, and that makes the adoption journey more difficult for both the parents and the child. So knowing your limits, starting with what is your motivation for adopting? What is your motivation for going through, other routes for being a parent? You know, is it a stopgap? Are you looking at this as a stopgap for your own natural birth child? Is that the right motivation? So those are the things where we need to be self-aware and to know the reasons. That's the starting point. Why do we want to do this before we go there?
Yeah, I mean that fair point. Fair point. Tutu, you made a point earlier where you said, if you say you can't love the child, or it's more about you than the actual process. I wanted to hear a bit more from you on that.
Um,
Yeah.
sure. And, I even wanted to give a personal example. Even though, I mean, it may look like adoption, but maybe I just have never termed it as adoption. Our first child, my first son, I didn't give birth to him biologically, but he's my son. And I can never call it what the name um, in like the way people would address normally the kind of relationship between us, how I am to him. I can't even say it, so he's my son, period. And all of you ladies know, you all know him. I mean, you guys watched him grow up, and we now say at my take he's our son. um I don't feel any differently. As a matter of fact, I even feel like I'm his biological mom. So I don't understand, when people, say that it can be more problematic to raise a child that is not yours. I mean, my own biological children did not even find out that I did not give birth to him biologically until he graduated from college. So they had lived with him for about 10 years before they found out. And the only reason they even found out was because my husband and I were concerned that the parents that attended his college graduation party may, say something to their kids, who may say something to to his siblings. So that was why we came up, had to tell them. And since that conversation, when we said it has never ever come up in our family again, ever again. Like, he's their brother, he's my son. As a matter of fact, his siblings insist that he's my favorite. And so we have that going on in the house, like, oh, my favorite first son, my favorite, and they all say, no, mom, he's your favorite, period. So I think again that it's more about the person and not the child. Because if you have already accepted this child as your child, you are not seeing this child as an adopted child. You don't see this child as a stepchild, as, whatever labels people give to that type of relationship. You see this child as yours. So if the child is misbehaving, as children are wont to do, so it's not because you adopted this child. It's not because this child did not come out of your body. This is just plain parenting issue. I mean, kids, your own kids, it may even do worse things. So it's you saying, I have already accepted this child as mine. So whatever problem, this is just part of parenting. This is just a child being a child. So all those things people say, I personally don't believe. I think it's more about you. And for adoption, I mean, if you go out of your way to say, oh, I'm going to adopt this child, of course that requires more responsibility for you. And yeah, Jumoke is right. She says, as a mother, you go through waves of emotions anyway, because life is happening. No one is perfect. Very, very true. So I mean, I just encourage, like, if you truly, truly love, I mean, you won't say you're having more problems because this child didn't come out of your body.
I
Um,
mean,
wait,
go ahead.
sorry, Faye. Lola said something. She said, if you truly cannot see the adopted child as yours, please, that maybe this part is not for you.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off what Tutu said, there's a story that comes out of Nigeria where um, the adopted child misbehaved, probably lit a candle or something, or tried to burn someone, and their immediate reaction was to return the child to the adoption agency. And that broke my heart. That seriously
Mm.
broke my heart because, like Motoye said, these children are coming from traumatic homes. We don't know what that child has been through. And for you to step up to say you want to adopt, and your first inclination is, when you see the child act out, you want to return the child to the adopted home. Why on earth did you even try to adopt the child in the first place? Why did you? You do not have the grace. Even the children that come out of your body act out most of the time. I mean, I have stories for days, but your initial reaction is not to send that child back somewhere because there's nowhere to send the child back to. Do you take the child back to the hospital? Why would you want to send the child back to the adoption agency? Please, as we are shedding light and awareness about this, really consider if this is what God will have you do. Because once you decide to adopt a child, that child should be seen as yours and nothing else. Just
Well
please.
said.
Yeah.
Well said.
Can I
I
can I
think.
quickly add something to that?
Go ahead.
Just with respect to, like, you got to know what you have grace for, and ditto to everything that you said. I will say that um, when you are going through the adoption process, at the end of the day, with any child that you get, whether your own, no matter how many preferences you tell the agency you have, nobody has a crystal ball, right? You're whether it's dealing with developmental delays, or you just behavioral issues, you just don't know whether it's yours or adopted. However that child comes, nobody has a crystal ball. But I just wanted to encourage folks to say that, you know it is okay when you are going through the adoption process to tell the agency, to tell whoever it is that's helping to facilitate what it is that you're open to and what it is that you're not. Like we told the agency, hey, we do not want to deal with a child with any kind of serious handicap or physical impairment or anything like that. We also told the agency, hey, we don't want a child that has been exposed to these types of drugs. Right now, um, you got to choose your lane in that, right? Because sometimes if you make the options too narrow, it could make it difficult for you to find a match, because a lot of these children are coming from these types of difficult situations. But I also want to say, look, it's okay to say I can handle this but not that, right? We made a decision as a family, especially because my husband and I both work. We don't have the option to be a single income home. We already have a child in the home, and we wanted to be mindful of what he is exposed to. We made certain decisions about what we could handle financially, what we could handle emotionally, etc. That is okay. There are plenty of options. There are a lot of children that need love. Not all of them have disabilities. Not all of them have, come from these troubled backgrounds. A lot of them do, but not all.
So I think what we're
And
saying at
those
the
that
end of the
do,
day, mm,
sorry, I was going to say, and those that do, God does not leave his, there are people that is what they want. That is what they are looking for, and that's what they have the grace to handle. And I follow several people on Instagram that have adopted different types of children, um, and they love and are loved, both ways.
I think at the end of the day, God gives us the grace for what we can handle. And I think at the end of the day, what we're saying is go in with your eyes wide open, but don't convince yourself that you cannot or will not, and just think of all the negatives. Because all I hear is, a lot of people just focusing on the negatives and not the possibilities, and not the fact. And the fact is, raising a child is difficult, whether it's yours or not. So, just go in with your eyes wide open, but also don't expect it to be a walk in the park in any case. I think I wanted us to quickly tackle one more issue before we wrap up, and this is of our single friends, who want kids. And time is passing. Should they keep waiting for that ring before they go ahead? I mean, I'm of the opinion that no. Why? I mean, I have an aunt that I wish she would have adopted. Now she's much older. I wish she would have adopted when she was around my age. I have friends that I wish would consider it. So I don't know. What are our thoughts on this?
Well, this is another area of, that I feel strongly about. So I had friends that before they turned 40, I was encouraging them, please go freeze your eggs, go and freeze your eggs and everything. I mean, we prayed together. So I wasn't speaking out, from a lack of faith that they weren't going to get married before 40, but I was like, for whatever it's worth, go freeze your eggs. Well, some did not. So here we are today. If any of my single friends decide they want to adopt, I will be there to cheer them on and hope they would even make me the godmother of the child. I think this should be they should go ahead. And I know in the past I've said things like, oh, even if they want to give birth to the child through IVF, and I think Faye said no, that's not, she doesn't think that's right. And today, of course, I agree with her. So I mean, yeah, they can definitely consider adoption. So for singles out there, single women, even single men that have the capacity to go ahead and adopt, and we'll be here rooting for you. Again, I know another problem they may run into is the church. I've seen, at least right now, I know of two ladies in church. Yes, Jumoke, I know you'll definitely go for it. I know of two ladies that have adopted, two Christian ladies in church that have adopted and are happy. So I guess my charge to members of the body of Christ, because, it starts with us. we are the ones that are unable to mind our business and just feel we must opine on every issue. Please mind your business. If you don't have anything positive to say to these people, you don't know what they're going through. Some of them are in their late 40s, some of them are in their 50s. You don't know what they are going through. So if you don't have anything positive to say, please be quiet. And for the ladies and men, please go out there, adopt. Trust me, there are more people that are supportive of you than the naysayers. So please follow your heart. If you're interested in any of us providing support, working through, as you make your preferences, please feel free and reach out to us. We'll be happy to. And trust me, there are many people like us out there that will cheer you on.
Thanks, Tutu. Although I don't really remember being against IVF. Anyone, my own. I mean, any way that anybody wants to have a child, especially for, those of our single ladies that are older. However, they decide that they want to go about having kids, I'm fully supportive. Let's just say for the record.
But
Over to others. Let's hear one or more before we.
But we are not supportive of them, going to get pregnant outside of wedlock. That's the caveat.
Oh, okay.
We are not.
I hear what you're saying. Just to be clear, I was
have sex and get pregnant because no. So,
right,
I draw the line right there.
Right. That's a whole nother story.
I actually know of one of my older friends that actually adopted, and she's still single, but she adopted and she's fine. Actually two, and they are enjoying their children. So please, if you single and you want to adopt, please go ahead. I'm fine.
There are so many children out there that want to be loved, and my husband always says this verse. I just asked him to send it to me. Malachi 2:15. It says, "Has not the one God made you? You belong to Him in body and spirit. And what does the one God seek? Godly offspring. Godly offspring." So the more of us adopt, the more the children will learn about God. And develop faith at a young age. It's a blessing to be a blessing. I wish like Lola. I think for me, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. I don't have the energy, and the older I get, the less I have the. When I was young, it was something that was on my list. But I really hope that we have shine the light on adoption and surrogacy and just generally alternatives to childbirth. Thank you so much, Motoye. Your story is beautiful. I am so happy that you were able to join us today. And we look forward to seeing photos of Eliana as she grows. We will definitely be in touch. I love the fact that you're open about sharing your story. We need more stories like this. And I know that God is going to bless you and your family as you have taken this step.
May I say,
you want to say
yes,
something?
I just wanted to say one more thing, that there are three main ways, like Omotoye said, to adopt if you're in the States. I can't speak for other countries. And she mentioned private agency. She mentioned foster to adoption. And I know a number of people that adopt internationally. If you want to know about international laws around adoption, the U.S. Department of State has a page where you can go on there. And I wish I was able to put it on the chat, but maybe in another, our next one, I can provide that resource where you can go and find out about the adoption laws of different countries. We want to encourage people to adopt. We'll try and get those resources, make those available for folks.
Okay. Yeah, we'll post them online. We'll post them online for you. But please, if you want a baby, consider adoption. We have beautiful children out there every day.
And just before we wrap up, we are all believers, children of God, and we are making awareness for the church to hopefully rise up to another level and to know that this is truly of God. This is something God supports and He defends and He honors. So hopefully other churches will get the drift.
Absolutely. God bless you all and have a wonderful time. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I believe we're going to be discussing help. I'm going through a career crisis. So look forward to that. Take care. God bless.
Bye. I hope we're no longer live.